Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and by viewer request, we're out here taking a look at the 2014 Scion FR-S. Now this is the exact same car as the 2014 Toyota 86. It's sold as the Scion FR-S in the United States and the Toyota 86 in other world markets. This is also essentially the same car as the Subaru BRZ. The FR-S and the BRZ are pretty much identical. They share the same body, the same doors, the same drivetrain, most of the same interior bits, although there is a slight difference in terms of styling on the inside as well as some of the option packages between this and the BRZ. That means in this video I'll be focusing primarily on the FR-S, but I will also be pointing out where the BRZ differs from this car because it's essentially the same vehicle. I like to call the FR-S and the BRZ baby's first track car because it really describes what this vehicle is about, but it also describes what this vehicle is not about. This car is not a Mustang GT type competitor. This is not gonna, lay 12 feet of rubber strips down the road. It's not gonna do lurid tail spins. It's not really a donut kind of car in a parking lot. Instead, this car is all about performance, feeling, and precision out on the track and out on the road as well. The FR-S is a decidedly Japanese style going on up front. And what I mean by that is we have very flowing lines. We don't have really harsh corners or harsh creases like you find in the Americans or some of the German entries right now. This very large opening right here. And then these headlamps are halogen headlamps by default in the FR-S. If you get the monogram series, then you do get HID headlamps. Over on the Subaru side, halogen headlamps are standard, and in the limited edition, we get LED daytime running lamps and the HID headlamps again. Our tester doesn't have fog lamps, but they are available on the monogram series of FR-S, and you can get them on the Subaru BRZ as well. Now, right here we have less than 5 inches of ground clearance, which is very low for a modern vehicle. And from this angle, you can really tell how low the front of the FR-S is. If I stand in front of this front end comes just above my knee. Don't let the low slung profile fool you. This is a relatively short car. It's about 166 inches long, which is about 10 inches longer than that Mazda MX-5 Miata. But the reason for that is because right here behind the front seats, we have 2 extra seats. This is a 2+2 type coupe. This is about the same length as the Nissan 370Z, which is more of a hatchback and has that really cut rear end to it. We do get a little bit more interior room in that 370Z, but this is significantly shorter than something like a Genesis or a Mustang. Out back, the simple flowing design theme continues. We have these tail lamp modules that do stick out a little bit from the rear. You can get a spoiler in certain models of the FR-S as well as the BRZ that will stick right up on top of here. Now, if you take a look at this lamp module right down here at the bottom of the car, this may make more sense for Toyota 86 shoppers than either Scion or the Subaru shoppers, because this is sort of a stylized version of the old Toyota logo. You'll find these large dual exhaust tips on all models of the FR-S, BRZ, and 86, and then we have tow recovery hook openings right here, so you can insert a tow hook right there, and that's so you can more easily transport your car to the track or away from the track, whether it's damaged or not. So if you do plan on tracking your FR-S like some people do, then you will be happy to see those right on the car because it makes it an awful lot easier to put your car on a car carrier and strap it down safely. Under the hood is where you'll find the biggest example of the Toyota and Subaru collaboration on the FR-S and the BRZ. It's this 2-liter 4-cylinder boxer engine. Now, most 4-cylinder engines are inline engines. That means that all the cylinders are right in line with one another. You can kind of think of that as stacking your Coke cans right next to one another, all in a little line. This is a boxer engine, or a horizontally opposed engine, and that means that the cylinders are separated into 2 different banks. We have 2 on this side of the car and 2 on that side of the car over there, and they're going at it like this in relation to the car, horizontally like that. Now, this results in a very low center of gravity in terms of the engine design. This also results in a relatively short and compact engine. It's really noticeable on the front because the front of the engine is right about here and the back of the engine is right about here. It's a very, very compact engine. The transmission actually starts right around here in the car. Now, although this 2-liter engine is very closely related in terms of design to the Impreza, the Forester, and the Legacy, there are an awful lot of parts that are unique to this vehicle, including the block of the engine. So this is not just an engine straight out of an Impreza and then modified by Toyota. This is really a Toyota and Subaru collaboration to design a completely new and much lighter weight engine. More importantly, this also uses Toyota's D4S direct injection system, which is sort of a hybrid between regular direct injection and a port injection system. It has both port and direct injectors, so the engine can choose whatever it wants to at whenever time it thinks that's most appropriate. All in all, this engine is good for 200 horsepower at a lofty 7,000 RPM and 151 pound-feet of torque at 6,400 RPM, which is quite high. By default, the engine is mated to a 6-speed manual transmission, but you can get a 6-speed automatic as well. Fuel economy figures come out at 22 miles per gallon city, 30 miles per gallon highway, and 25 combined for this manual version that we're testing right here. And if you equip it with the automatic, fuel economy actually goes up to 25 miles per gallon city, 34 highway, and 28 combined. The lower fuel economy numbers with the manual transmission are because of the short gearing, which helps improve performance in the manual equipped model. Now again, this car doesn't have a whole lot of low-end torque. It's 151 pound-feet of torque at 6,400 RPM. And in 6th gear at 70 miles an hour, the engine is spinning around 3,200 RPM, so it is relatively high. You get a much lower RPM at 70 miles an hour in that 6-speed automatic. The reason the Boxer engine was used is because part of the design mission for the FR-S was to give this a very low center of gravity. And they really succeeded, because the center of gravity on this FR-S is lower than a Porsche Cayman, lower than a Nissan GT-R, and it's just barely 0.6 of an inch higher off the ground than a Lexus LFA supercar. And it's also about 0.2 of an inch higher than a Porsche 911 GT3. So this is a very, very low center of gravity in the car that really helps out the handling out on the road. When you have a low center of gravity, you don't get quite as much body roll, not quite as much tip and dive, etc. Now, rather unfortunately, a low center of gravity really means that everything in the car is low to the ground. From this angle, you can see that the roof line is definitely below my breast height. And if you actually take a look at where the back and the bottom of the seat cushion comes in relation to my leg, it's barely above my ankle. So there is a serious consideration when it comes time to shop for an FR-S or a BRZ or anything that's this low, and that's getting in and out of the vehicle. You can see from this angle that if I sit down on the driver's seat, and I'm really just sitting on the edge bolster actually, I'm not actually in the seat, that doesn't really help too much better if I'm in the seat, it's kind of difficult to get in and out of this car because it is so low. Now I say this jokingly, but it is kind of true. If you're 20 years old, you should buy this car because you'll be able to get in and out no problem. If you're 30 years old, you need to hurry because you don't have that much time left. And if you're 40, you need to know that if you get in the FR-S or the BRZ, there's a chance you might not be able to get out. Once you get inside, you do need to keep in mind this car does start just over $25,000, so you won't find a power adjustable seat. We have a 6-way manually adjustable seat, and we don't have any adjustable lumbar in this seat either. It is very heavily bolstered, and actually in terms of fabric, I prefer the fabric in the FR-S to the BRZ. This fabric is soft, it's also smooth, and the BRZ in base form has some relatively coarse fabric. Now if you get the Monogram Series FR-S or the limited edition BRZ, then you do get very nice Alcantara and leather seats that are probably my preference. All models have a tilt telescopic steering wheel with a decent range of motion to help you achieve a better driving position. Taller drivers and those with longer legs will really notice a big difference between this and the Mazda MX-5. If I stretch out in this seat, the seat is all the way back in its tracks, and I have about 2 inches to go before my feet actually touch the pedals in a resting position, and I have about 2 inches of headroom here. So this means a taller driver could easily fit in here, or someone that's my height, I'm 6 feet tall, could actually wear a helmet inside the FR-S and be on a track. That is important consideration if you're going to track your FR-S, because a lot of tracks require that you do wear a helmet. A lot of autocross events also require that. So you do need to keep in mind that you can put a helmet on and fit in this car. However, I do not fit in an MX-5 coupe with a helmet on. Let's adjust this seat back to my normal driving position, and then I will see how well I fit behind myself. Getting in and out of the rear is no easy feat. The driver's seat does not slide forward like this passenger seat does when you pull its release hatch. That's to help keep the driver's seat adjusted in its normal position. I do have to really work to get my feet in this footwell here. As you can see, it is physically possible to fit 4 6-foot-tall adults in this vehicle. I wouldn't want to do it for too long, however. Aside from the fact that I really had to work getting my feet in the footwells, I don't have a whole lot of headroom back here. My head is actually touching this rear glass. That's not exactly comfortable. I could do it, however, for a short trip to lunch or something like that. It's actually a bit more comfortable in the back than I had expected it to be. It's more comfortable than you'll find in something like a Jaguar XK coupe. Overall, I give these rear seats about a 4 out of 10, which is actually a little bit higher than I thought they would be. Most importantly, these back seats are infinitely more comfortable than the non-existent back seats in the Mazda MX-5, because of course it doesn't have any, so it scores 0 out of 10 points in the rear seat comfort test. Now, no one expects a generous trunk in a coupe, let alone a coupe that's really designed for only 2 passengers. And of course, the FR-S really doesn't disappoint in that area too much. You can fit 3 roller bags, and these are the largest size you can carry on a domestic flight in here in this position. It is a little bit tricky to get them in and out of the car, however, because you can't just get them out that way. You actually have to sort of rotate them around inside the car into place, and then you can get the bags in and out of the trunk. Under the very lightweight load floor, you will find a donut spare tire, which is a nice touch in a car like this, especially if you do plan on tracking your car. The engineers somehow managed to include a cargo pass-through from the trunk into the passenger area of this car. You can see the seat back folds in a 100% folding fashion right there. This cargo pass-through is extraordinarily large and extraordinarily square as well, so that really makes it an awful lot easier to put larger items right into the back of your car. I'm told by Scion that you can fit a set of 4 tires and wheels right back here in the cargo area and right here on this rear seat back if you do plan on tracking your car. Overall, the FR-S managed to score 5 out of 10 points when it comes to our trunk comfort index. I have been in smaller trunks. All models have fixed shoulder belts for both the driver and the front passenger. They're attached to the front seat via this detachable loop arrangement right there, and that's because the seatbelt is actually fastened to the car, both at the top and at the bottom, not the seats. That makes it a little bit easier to get in and out of the back seat if you unsnap that. The front seats in the FR-S and the BRZ and the 86 are all very aggressively bolstered, as you can see. We have very aggressive shoulder bolstering right here. And if you are a wider person across the shoulders, then you may find this a little bit less comfortable. I don't think I'm exactly the widest person across the top, but even I found this just a little bit narrow for my tastes. We have a standard height adjustable headrest here, and the seat fabric is this very attractive soft fabric. You will find slightly coarser fabric in the BRZ, and you have optional leather and Alcantara in both the FR-S and the BRZ. In the FR-S, you'll only find that in the monogram edition, which we're told is a limited production version. Moving over to the doors, we do need to keep in mind this is a relatively inexpensive vehicle, so we do have soft touch plastics across the top, a lot of hard touch plastics in the body of the door, and we have a soft touch armrest right there. You'll find a nice change to the 2014 model year right here on the front door between the speaker and the window switches. This is now a soft touch panel, which is where the door hits your knees, and that's really made this a decent amount more comfortable than the 2013 model. You'll find that same soft touch plastic applied on the center console for your other knee. If we open the glove box, you will find a relatively small glove compartment. This really can't hold much more than this absolutely enormous Scion manual and possibly a wallet right there. Well, this may look like carbon fiber trim in the FR-S. This is actually a motif based on the Toyota logo, and you will find that in the FR-S as well as the world market Toyota 86. The dashboard is a soft touch injection molded dashboard. It is kind of rubbery in appearance and rubbery in texture. This makes it very easy to clean. Unfortunately, it does collect dust relatively easily. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, we have these two air vents right in the middle. These open and close with these knobs right here, and only the center vane moves the air around. It's not quite as effective as it would be if it had multiple vanes to direct the air. Below that, all models now have this touchscreen display audio system, and you can optionally get the bespoke navigation system in this radio as well. That is a dealer installed accessory. It's just over $1,000, and it enables this map button right over here. So you can see if I press this map button right now, it says bespoke premium audio is not installed. Contact a Scion dealer for upgrade instructions. Below the radio, we have our analog clock, hazard lights, single zone standard climate control. You can get automatic climate control in the monogram version of the FR-S or in the BRZ Limited. We have a single USB input right over here with an auxiliary input as well. I have my smartphone connected right here, and then there is this little slot right there underneath the climate control where you can stick a phone. The standard transmission in this FR-S is this short throw 6-speed manual transmission. First and second are relatively close together, and you can see that the gating between first and sixth is not terribly far apart. So this is a very nice classic short throw manual transmission. One thing that I did dislike is that reverse is all the way across and up. That's just a personal preference. Manual transmissions either choose to put reverse up here or across there, so either to the right and then down, or all the way to the left and then up. I find that this particular design just makes it a little bit more tricky to do 5 or 10 point turns because you're doing sort of this action with this little pull-up knobby. Behind the shifter, we have two very important buttons. We have a VSC Sport button and we have our traction control off button. Between these two buttons, you can completely disable the traction and stability control system in the FR-S. You can also choose between a variety of different modes as well. Now, the FR-S does have a mechanical limited slip rear differential, and it also has a brake actuated limited slip function in the back. The reason for that is the brake actuated function can act sooner than a Torsen style limited slip differential, which is what this vehicle has in the rear, and you can turn that on and off depending on what you want to do. This little space behind the VSC Sport button and the traction control button is where you would find the heated seat buttons if our FR-S was so equipped. You can buy a center armrest for the driver and the front passenger from the dealer, but it does occupy the slot where this 2-position cup holder inserts right here into this large center console slot. You can select between a forward position or a backward position for this, and there's an additional little slot right here that you can put a smartphone. We do have a 12-volt power port right here in the center. Over on the driver's side, we have this very attractive 4-dial instrument cluster, and these needles do stay illuminated during the day, which is a very nice touch. Creates kind of an interesting look. The dials themselves do not light up unless you turn on the headlamps. We have this very large central tachometer, and you can see this engine revs all the way up to 7,500 RPM, and you really do need to rev it up quite high because, again, peak torque doesn't happen until about 6,500 RPM or so, so you do end up revving this engine quite a lot. We have a trip computer in that small display right there in the tachometer, And as you can see, we have been averaging a very solid 28 miles per gallon during my week with this car, even though I have been driving it a great deal in winding mountain situations as well as idling during photo and video shoots. In keeping with the sporting missions, this car has a very business-forward steering wheel, so you won't find any radio or cruise control buttons right on the steering wheel. You will have to reach across to the radio in order to change your track. We have the cruise control buttons right down here on a stalk. This is essentially the same steering wheel that you will find in the FR-S and the BRZ model, although the BRZ does change the colors around just a little bit. On the driver's left, we have the same soft touch pads I spoke about earlier. That is something I did recall from the first time I drove an FR-S, that these hard panels were a little bit tiring on the knees. And we have these round air vents on this side, just like the passenger side as well. Let's just air out the numbers right away. I ran from 0 to 60 in this car in 6.88 seconds. That means that this is notably slower than something like a 2-liter EcoBoost Fusion or a V6 Honda Accord or a V6 Camry. The FR-S is not about straight line performance, and that's why I give this 6 out of 10 points when it comes to acceleration. This is also not about a quiet cabin. I scored about 74 decibels in my cabin noise test at 50 miles an hour, so this gets about a 5 out of 10 when it comes to cabin noise. This is relatively similar to something like a Toyota Corolla or some other economy car. So if the FR-S isn't about acceleration and it isn't about a quiet country drive out on your favorite mountain road, what is it about? It's about handling and it's about precision, and mostly it's about feel. I give this car 9 out of 10 points when it comes to handling, not because of the empirical road holding numbers, because in truth, you can get better horizontal Gs in something like a Ford Mustang or a Genesis, or even probably an Accord Coupe in certain configurations with the right tires. That's not what the FR-S is about. The FR-S is about feel and it's about precision. It's about everything in this car working perfectly together. And this really may sound strange, but the low rolling resistance tires on the FR-S are actually part of the equation that makes this car score 9 out of 10 points in my handling test. Because the low rolling resistance tires are very well mated to the power characteristics of this car. We only have 151 pound-feet of torque in this engine, only 200 horsepower, even though this is relatively light. But the choice of the tires, the choice of the engine, etc., everything works very well in this car. The suspension in the FR-S is tuned to give you a very, very neutral to something approaching maybe a very, very slight hair of oversteer in this car when you're in neutral handling situations. And if you don't know what a neutral handling situation is, it basically means when the car is entering a corner and you're not power on. So basically you put the transmission in neutral and you enter a corner. How does the car behave just based on your steering input? And this car will basically just slide off to the side in exactly the same form and pointing the same direction that you were when you entered the corner. That's very different than most rear-wheel drive cars out on the market that actually tend to understeer a little bit. And the reason for that is because understeer is more predictable for most people. But the FR-S is all about teaching you driving dynamics of a rear-wheel drive car on a track situation at reasonable speeds. So in this FR-S with the low rolling resistance tires and the relatively small amount of power, you can actually feel how a rear-wheel drive track car would behave at much lower and much safer speeds. So if you're learning how to drive a track car, then you want to start out in something like this because you can really feel how a car behaves out on the road at speeds where you're not as likely to kill yourself. So if you're in an autocross style event, this is a very good car to be in if you're really interested in driving dynamics and how a car really behaves out on the road. That's not to say that the FR-S doesn't handle well, because this does handle very well. It just doesn't handle as well as something like a Mazda Miata, which is in a very similar vein as this car. It's very focused on feel, it's very focused on lightweight performance and handling. But the Mazda Miata isn't quite as well balanced all the way around as the FR-S. I think that every aspect of the FR-S is incredibly well balanced with one another. And the Mazda Miata doesn't have the performance, but it has very good handling, whereas this has sort of appropriate performance and decent handling. It's just kind of a slightly better mix there in the performance and handling department. Meanwhile, something like a Genesis or a Mustang won't perform as well on very small tracks, and they aren't going to be quite as much fun to drive as this. They don't have the precision, they don't have quite that same balance, but they are going to handle and perform much better on a track. In fact, if you stick something like even a V6 Mustang out on a track, especially a larger track, it's going to be faster than this FR-S. On that same track front, the more straightaways you have on your track, the faster those other options will be versus something like this car. In terms of braking, I give this car 8 out of 10 points. The stopping distances are a little bit longer than I would like, mostly down to the tire choice. We do have a decent amount of fade resistance going on in this brake design. The light curb weight, the small engine, and the low rolling resistance tires combine to give this car excellent fuel economy. Even driving like I haven't been this entire week, I've been averaging about 28 miles per gallon, which is a little bit better than the EPA says you will in the manual transmission version. So I give this 10 out of 10 points here. If you do get the automatic transmission version, not quite sure why you would, but if you do get the automatic transmission version, your fuel economy will be slightly better. The reason the fuel economy is better in the automatic is because the gearing is much taller. The gearing is actually quite short in this manual transmission version. At 70 miles an hour in 6th gear, this engine is spinning around 3,000 RPM, and it needs to spin around 3,000 RPM in order to make it up over highway overpasses because there's not a whole lot of low-end torque going on. Now, in contrast, the automatic transmission would have to shift a bit more on the highway than this manual transmission version. The automatic isn't quite as much fun, but it is a little bit more practical for daily driving. In terms of the manual transmission, the shifter feel is absolutely excellent. The engagement has a very nice, notchy, precise feel to it. It doesn't feel rubbery at all. And the clutch pedal is very easy to use. It has a very definite engagement. It's very linear. It's very easy to find the engagement point in this car. An important thing to keep in mind is that because this car is a performance style car, it has a relatively light flywheel. And because of that, and the fact that we don't have a whole lot of low-end torque, it is fairly easy to stall this car off the line. The big takeaway for me is that the FR-S and the BRZ are one of the most fun cars that I have ever driven out on my favorite winding mountain roads like this. And it's not about the raw numbers, because if I just put this car in 4th gear here and settle down on this road, and I look down at the speedometer, then I realize that I'm not really going that fast. I was going about 35 miles an hour back there, but it was an awful lot of fun. And that's very different than other fun cars out on this road. If you take a look at something like a BMW M6 for some reason, not that I'm comparing this to an M6, mind you, but just using this as an example, if you take a look at the speeds required to have that level of fun in something like an M6 or something like a V8 Mustang, the speeds are an awful lot higher. And that's really what this car is about. It's about delivering the smiles, the fun, the thrill, the precision, that rear-wheel drive feel at relatively low speeds. Obviously, this car isn't designed to appeal to the speed freaks out there. It's just not that kind of car. So if that really describes you and you're after the best 0 to 60 numbers or the best road holding numbers, then just cross the FR-S off your list, because that's not really what this car is about. If instead you're looking for a well-balanced machine and you're looking for something to really hone your skills before you step up into something more powerful or more exciting out on the track, then the FR-S definitely is the car for you. According to Scion, a decent number of people will be buying this car as their daily commuter, and as a result, I have to give it 6 out of 10 points when it comes to the ride. And that's because the springs and the dampers are relatively firm in the FR-S, as they are in the BRZ. There is a slight difference between the FR-S and the BRZ in terms of damper and spring tuning, but overall they're both very, very firm. And it really doesn't make for the best daily driver, if I'm honest. Freeway expansion joints, potholes, everything like that, it's very noticeable, and this car transmits just about every road imperfection right to your backside and right to your vertebrae. Pricing in the United States is very simple. The FR-S starts at $25,255 for the manual transmission version, and it ends at $26,355 for the automatic transmission version. All the other options on the FR-S really are standalone dealer-installed options. So if you want the navigation bespoke audio system, then the dealer will actually install that for you. It won't be on the traditional window sticker. Now, there is also that monogram version of the FR-S, new for the 2014 model year. We're told it will be a relatively limited set, however. That'll be $28,155 for the manual transmission monogram edition. The monogram edition gives you the leather and Alcantara seats, the HID headlamps, you get the push-button start, a spoiler on the back, auto climate control, and a few other goodies as well. The Subaru version starts at $25,595, and the limited manual transmission version starts at $27,595. Now, Subaru, on the other hand, does have options available, so they're not priced quite the same way. However, if you actually configure these cars the same way, then they do end up right about the same price. One thing worth noting is that the BRZ Limited model does come with a traditional navigation system rather than the optional dealer-installed bespoke audio system that the Scion does. And honestly, if I were going to buy the Scion just because you like the looks of the Scion just a little bit better than that Subaru, then I wouldn't get the factory navigation system. I would spend that $1,100 on an aftermarket nav system. It would look better, and I think it would actually integrate just about as well with the car. When it comes to comparisons, the only thing you can really compare this car to, other than that BRZ or the Toyota 86, is the Mazda MX-5 Miata. And that's just a little bit unfair because that MX-5 Miata is considerably older and it's due to be completely replaced for the 2015 model year. Now, I know that a lot of people want to compare this to something like a Ford Mustang, a Nissan 370Z, or the Hyundai Genesis, but they're just not the same kind of car. All those options, other than that Mazda MX-5 Miata, are considerably faster than this. So the 2-liter Genesis is really more for the straight-line performance tuner crowd, especially the tuner crowd that wants to do engine performance upgrades on their car. You can't really do engine performance upgrades on this car very cheaply, whereas you can do them relatively inexpensively on that turbo engine in the Genesis. Now there are supercharger kits, and as I understand it, there are some turbocharger kits available for this engine. However, they're all relatively expensive because this car wasn't equipped with a turbocharger from the factory, and that Genesis is. The Genesis, the Mustang, and that 370Z are also considerably heavier vehicles, and that really shows out on the road, especially out on the track. This car is really designed for short tracks and small tracks, something along the lines of an autocross track or a relatively small road course, whereas those other cars really do well in larger tracks. It's really obvious when I've had this car out on a track like Laguna Seca, or I should say Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca if I'm being kind to the Mazda people. And that's because this car is relatively slow in the straightaways, and those corners are all just a little bit too fast for these relatively low grip tires. However, if you put this on an autocross course with the Genesis, the 370Z, then it's going to blow them away. It's much, much better in tight corners and tight situations. Very much like that Mazda MX-5. If you're after a convertible, until this car is finally available in the United States in a convertible form, then I would get that MX-5 Miata. It's an awful lot of fun, and it's also a drop top. Even though it is due to be replaced in 2015, I wouldn't mind buying a 2014 right now. It feels a little bit more nimble, it's a little bit tighter in the corners than this car, even though this has a better center of gravity. However, if you do plan on tracking your car, which means you're going to need a helmet, then this is pretty much the car for you, because it's just not possible to fit an average-sized person in an MX-5 coupe with a helmet on, and you really can't take convertibles out on a lot of tracks. A lot of those tracks won't let you do that, so that is something to really keep in mind. Of course, tires are a big part of any car's handling ability, and I suspect that if you put summer tires on the FR-S, that I would prefer the way this handles out on the road to the MX-5, because some of it really for me is just a lack of grip at higher end limits in the FR-S. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2014 Scion FR-S. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. Go ahead and check out the related videos at the end of this video. You can email your questions to alex@alexandautos.com. Go ahead and find me over at facebook.com/alexandautos. Comment on this video, tell me what you liked and didn't like, and I'll see you next week.